Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll call the meeting of the Development Committee, County Member of the Order. Roll call, please.
Member Krajewski.
Here.
Member Covert. Here. Member Garcia. Here. Member Ozog. Here. Member Rutledge. Here. Chair Tornatori.
Here. And we have a quorum, and as this will be our last Development Committee meeting before a new board is sworn in, just want to thank everybody for serving. Whoever may or may not be back, we've accomplished a great deal. We've done it in an amicable way, which is best serving the people of the county, and I thank you all for your participation. Regarding public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. It's at the beginning of the meeting. Any comment on zoning items must be limited to a discussion of testimony or evidence presented at the Zoning Board of Appeals. We cannot, nor will we, accept any new testimony or evidence and use it in our determinations. We have a 30-minute time limitation for public comment, 3 minutes per person. We have, it appears, 10 people signed up for public comment this morning. So I would ask you to limit yourself to 3 minutes or less if possible. If the person before you has said something that you intend to just reiterate, just tell us that you agree with them, and that will make things much quicker and much easier for us. And we will have someone timing you. I don't like to cut people off, but if I have to, I will. We will begin with Chuck. I can't read your last name, but Chuck, if you're here.
Yeah.
Okay. Feel free to start. Thank you.
Where would you like me?
Right there, fine. Wherever you want to be.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chuck Freund. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Schools in Naperville Community Unit School District. I'm here to make public comment about number 16, our addition for one of our elementary schools, which is Steeple Run Elementary. So thanks for this opportunity. I'll definitely do less than 3 minutes. I am here to represent our school district, but actually to be a voice for our students, our staff, and our Steeple Run community. At face value, the addition that's before you is a construction project. However, if you look deeper, it's really about our students. It's about our staff. It's about the educational experience of our students. And it's also about the community hub that our schools provide. Research shows how important physical elements within the learning spaces are as they relate to student achievement and student growth. We know now more than we've ever before that things like class size, lighting, acoustics, and also air quality matters significantly to the success of our students. And simply put, the more minor changes we've made over the last several years to maximize the learning spaces within this school have run their course, and we no longer meet the enrollment increases that we project in the next several years. Recognizing that families are connected to their neighborhood school and enrollment projections certainly do not show relief in the foreseeable future, we engaged with an architect about a year ago and evaluated our needs to develop a plan that's before you. This brought us to the proposal to add 4 additional classrooms so that each and every one of our students in that school benefits from a safe learning environment that's supportive of their needs. Outcomes of this project will include balanced class sizes, which we currently don't have, dedicated learning spaces for our youngest learners as we anticipate these classrooms to be for our kindergarten students and creating a wing on the east side of the building. Strategic placement for student services as our students require more mental health services than we've seen ever before, and much needed collaboration space for our staff. While additional enrollment translates to the need for additional space in classrooms, it also leads to increased staffing. And so for that reason, the proposed plan also addresses the need for additional parking and a kindergarten drop-off lane for our youngest learners to alleviate some of the traffic burden that we already have experienced in that school community. In closing, our families and staff take great pride in our schools, and that is no exception at Steeple Run Elementary. In this school, students do feel a sense of belonging, and that's due to our teachers who work very hard to make sure that each one of our students is connected. It occurs right now despite the fact that we're doubled up on classrooms, we're teaching lessons in hallways, We have access to fine arts classes very impacted due to lack of space. I'm very excited to see what our school community would do with this additional space. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Craig Sipka.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to address you about the Naperville Community Unit School District 203 Steeple Run Kindergarten Classroom Addition Project. My name is Craig Siepke. I work with White and Company in Darien, Illinois. We are Naperville's 203 architecture firm. I'm the project manager for the assignment, which we are discussing this morning. Subsequent to the most recent Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, I'd like to take this opportunity to clarify and address two aspects of the project that quite frankly, I feel I could have better articulated at the time of the public hearing. First, regarding the size and location of the addition, you previously heard Naperville's Assistant Superintendent Front articulate the recent hardship and stress placed on the existing facility by the increased number of students attending the school. Over the course of the last several months, we have partnered with Naperville 203 officials to explore multiple options for the location of an addition to alleviate this burden. Expanding off of the north and south sides of the building would negatively impact site amenities, playgrounds, and much needed hard surface play areas, and adjoining vehicular staging areas. Extensive and cost-prohibitive renovations to the existing facility in this area would be required to provide unencumbered access to all affected spaces. Also, the practical difficulties of staging construction operations in these locations, all the noise, dust, vibrations that must be mitigated to allow learning to happen unabated and in a safe manner, would require an expense that far exceeds the budget parameters approved by the Board of Education on behalf of its constituents. Building up on top of the existing facility also is not a possibility either, because the existing structure will not support any additional loads. The only logical location for expansion is the east side of the building, which will minimize the impact on school operations for the duration of the project, and when completed, will allow a streamlined, uninterrupted connection to the rest of the school. Second, an acknowledgement that the site dimensions are a bit restrictive and the unique shape of the property boundaries are challenging at best. We have diligently worked to keep the footprint of the addition to a minimum, to the minimum amount necessary to fulfill the requirements of the all-day kindergarten curriculum. New construction is kept as tight to the existing building as possible, which will ensure we have adequate space for parking and drop-off lane improvements. On-site parking is already deficient for the current number of staff members. Additional instructors needed to support the increased student population will only make things more difficult. The proposed parking lot provides enough parking to align with the number of users. The need for on-street parking will be eliminated. A dedicated kindergarten drop-off pickup lane was also included in the design for the intent of maintaining safe access to the building for students, student walkers, and direct access to the building from their car, to the entrance from their cars for those kiddos being dropped off by their parents. This lane will also help alleviate some of the traffic congestion in the surrounding neighborhood during peak traffic.
Greg, I'm going to ask you to wrap up if you could.
I hope this helps clarify any issues that you might have for the betterment of the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Connie Schmidt.
Hi, I'm Connie Schmidt. I live right here in DuPage County, and I'm speaking on the Herrick Lake stable that is asking for some changes. I'm a horse owner, so I like horses. I'll just establish that right now. We've lived in DuPage County for over 40 years. My husband and I have managed a property with horses, and we board horses on our property. There are times when it would have been more profitable for us to have more horses on our property than is legally allowed with the DuPage County rules. But because we didn't want to encumber the land and we didn't want to intrude on our neighbors, we didn't. More horses means more manure, more traffic, more trucks to remove the manure, at least I hope they're removing the manure, and more visitors to the location. This location does not seem suitable for an expanded use, although the request may just be for a fence to be moved and some other minor adjustments that opens the door for further encroachments. This property has a very unfortunate history, but that does not mean that new or current owners should impact the neighboring community, the neighbors in that area. I did a little research, just trying to understand the purpose of the DuPage County rules and regulations, and I found this information. The rules regarding animals is to provide harmonious relationships in the interaction between humans and animals by protecting animals from improper use, abuse, neglect, inhumane treatment, and health hazards. Provide security to residents from annoyance, intimidation, and injury from dogs or any other animals. Encourage responsible pet ownership. Provide for assessment of penalties or violations for enforcement and administration of the articles that are provided for the county. Agreeing to this petitioner's request would violate these established regulations of DuPage County and negatively impact the neighbors in the area. So I thank you very much. Hope I gained you a minute.
Thank you. We'll take a minute here, a minute there. It all works. Mark Daniel, also for here.
Good morning, everyone. Mark Daniel. I represent the applicant in this instance. We have a pretty clear issue that we're dealing with. The use has been in place since 1998, designed by the principal objector who lives next door in this house here. You have an 18-stall barn with stables, some turnout here, turnout areas up to the north, and an indoor riding arena. That exists today. The place has been full. It's been partly occupied continuously since 1998. We're here today to ask you for two things. A recommendation on a conditional use for a recreational use for stables and a riding academy, and a conditional use to allow an existing structure within a setback that's been there for longer than 5 years. That's the smaller pole barn. Mind you, our neighbor, a veterinarian, the principal objector, helped design the site and was principally responsible for operating it from a safety perspective when it comes to the health and welfare of the horses that were being stabled. The place will be supervised. There will be staff on site. One important thing here, and it's uncontested at hearing, there's no principal residence. That's a huge factor here. There's a permitted use under the zoning ordinance for stables accessory to principal residences. If there's a principal residence on site, you can have a stable and a ratio applies to govern the number of horses you can have based on your acreage. That's a permitted use accessory to a principal residential structure. It can be an attached stable or a detached stable. That's 37,700.8, subsection F. That section has been foisted upon the ZBA in a way that is contrary to what we're asking for legally. We're asking for a conditional use, not a permitted use. We don't have a principal residence. So that subsection F that has been raised plainly doesn't apply. Staff concurs in that, and staff's interpretation consistently since the spring. I spoke to the state's attorney's office yesterday about my correspondence to the state's attorney's office, and there was concurrence in the proposition that subsection F under 37,700.8 does not apply to this case. This is a conditional use, not a permitted use. That said, we've been here. All right. The first speaker today on the issue talked about change. There's no change. 18 horses have been able to stay here for the long term, 1998. 18 horses were cared for by people on site or by their owners or their riders. Sometimes a vet may have to be called in. They are fed multiple times a day. They are supplemented on site. There's an indoor riding arena for exercise. There's the outdoor turnout areas for exercise. And don't forget, there are 5 miles of trails. Someone at hearing said you can't ride all over the forest preserve. Well, the reality is there's only one place along the lake that you cannot ride a horse. This is the best place in the county for a horse. The property abuts a national equestrian trail. If you tell me this site's not possibly appropriate for the use, I have to ask you, where else would it be? The conditions proposed at the ZBA were entirely acceptable. We didn't even participate in their drafting. They came from our
I'm going to ask
testimony.
you to wrap up if you would, please.
The one note that one member of the ZBA raised was they were worried about having multiple trailers. We have parking spaces, not trailer spaces. There are 3 spaces available for trailers on site if you want to add that as a condition. I want to thank you all for your time on this. It's important to adhere to your zoning ordinance, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Joe Abel, also with Herrick for Herrick Lake.
Good morning. You said my name is Joe Stable. Some of you know me and some of you are new. I am a planning and zoning consultant. I have a degree in city and regional planning, a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, and probably the biggest part of my experience was 17 years as director of the DuPage County Development Department, which included the planning department, the zoning department, building department, and I was secretary of the Zoning Board of Appeals for 17 years. I emphasize that because I know this property. I've lived in DuPage County for 50 years, so I'm very familiar with the surrounding area, subject property, and the development. The county's first comprehensive plan was developed under my supervision, and the first comprehensive amendment to the zoning ordinance was done under my control. I've looked at this property, and as Mark has said, there is no other place that would be acceptable for a horse facility as this. In addition to all my experience, I have had a hunter jumper for over 10 years with my granddaughter. We are at a facility in South Naperville, much bigger, but I can tell you this is one of the lowest traffic generators that there is. Nobody goes and sees their horse every day. We go 3 days a week for 2 hours. My granddaughter is the jumper. I'm the hunter, I guess. And I can tell you that very, very low traffic generation from these kinds of facilities. You go there, you put your equipment on the horse, you ride the horse. Most of it's with instruction. Most of the activity is going to take place within the barn. I personally went through that barn. It is one of the nicest, well-constructed barns. The 18 stables are larger than most stables, even larger than what are at the St. James Farm. And they're just spectacular. This is the most unbelievable place you can imagine. And on top of it, as Mark said, access to the north and the south to trails. There's 2,400 acres of trails in this area. I looked at it from the standpoint of all the conditions. This meets all the conditions for a conditional use. It also makes common sense. Forgetting even about the standards that are in your ordinance, we meet every one of them, and that testimony is all in the transcript. So I think the most important thing here is, again, that this map shows, even beyond this map, it's nothing but recreation and open space from Naperville Road to the east and continuing another mile to the west. In terms of any impact on the surrounding property, you'll notice that this property was developed, as Mark said, in conjunction with the only person who is affected by it. The house is up closer to Butterfield Road. There is a 2,000 square foot, approximately 2,000 square foot barn or garage or whatever kind of building in the back of the principal house. And it blocks the view of the existing pole barn, stable, and riding facility. So there's a tremendous amount of activity taking place on the property next door that the subject property would not impact.
Can I ask you to wrap up, please, Joe?
Okay. Other than that, I think it's important to look at the site plan and see how the property was designed by the present owner, and one of the objectors. They designed it to make sure that this property fits perfectly on the subject property. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Jordan.
Hi, my name is Bill Jordan, and I own the property since '98. Mr. Dr. Borowiak. We designed the property. We designed everything to be on the 3 acres from day one. And that's how it's always been clean. We always had, we never had to make no complaints really from people or anything being there. We always take care of the manures. Everything's been hauled off site. We had no problems with traffic or anything. So I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Maj, I'm sorry, I can't read your writing.
Sumaya.
Oh, sorry.
Hello, my name is, good morning. My name is Sumaya Glastane. I live at 27W344 Butterfield Road. I live right across the street. I do oppose this petition. I'm a big numbers person, so in your packet, there were scenarios of how many horses should be there. And in the DuPage zoning, there was a section 37-700.8, and it referenced that residential districts are only allowed a certain amount of horses per square feet. I did the numbers on that, and history or not history, however big the property was before, our current scenario is there's 2.9 acres. 2.9 acres at 10,000 square feet means that you can really only have 5 horses. We are in a residential district. You can't change that. No matter what the history was, or no matter how big it was before, it is currently 2.9 acres. You're only allowed to have 5 horses. That also says in that ordinance that it has to be contiguous space. Once you start adding in the sheds and the barn and everything, you lose that. I also live across the street and I've seen accidents on Butterfield Road. There was even one last week. Traffic was stopped for an entire hour or something while they figured it out. Any more traffic going in and out of these driveways means we're going to see more accidents. I see the school buses struggle to pick up my kids from the front of the house every morning and drop them off at the end of the day. Call the sheriff's department to notify them that we have cars speeding past. The second we have cars going in and out of more driveways, there's more problems. Butterfield Road is very, very busy. This is very concerning from many different perspectives, not only from the amount of horses that we could have on that property, because I've never seen 18 there. I've seen maybe 5 or 6. So maybe that he's had 18 that have been housed in the shed. Then there's a humanity issue related there. And the humaneness, do we keep 18 horses locked up in a big shed in that enclosed area? So I'm asking you to oppose this for multiple reasons. I don't think it's right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Mike Roth.
Morning, everyone. Michael Roth, attorney for Steve Borowiak, the resident at 27 West 345 Butterfield Road. This is the 3rd attempt in recent months to put a commercial riding operation on a residentially zoned lot R2. We've set forth in Mr. Borowiak's sworn statement reasons why this proposal does not meet the residential standards for a stable operation and for the maintenance of horses, why it does not, in detail, why it does not meet the standards for a commercial stable operation, why it does not meet the standards for an exemption based upon an exemption from zoning standards based upon the agricultural character of the property, and why it does not meet the conditional use standards notwithstanding Mr. Abel's testimony. We've detailed the specific factual reasons why it does not meet any of these standards, and so we'd ask that you deny this. There's been an extensive letter writing campaign by Mr. Daniel. There's a lot of evidence that he submits in his own opinions that is outside the record of the fact of that. The fact is that this operation that they characterize as a continuous use is not a continuous use. The riding stable operation that they criticized Mr. Borowiak for was ended in 2003. It's about 20 years ago. It stopped operating as this so-called continuous operation. Yes, there have been horses there, 5 in number, that have been allowed. And that has happened, and there hasn't been any objection to that. It's when he exceeds that number that there's been objection. Over the last 20 years, he's been cited and paid the fines. This operation is going to change the character of the area. Anyone that goes out there and sees these properties can see that Mr. Borowiak's property is immediately, it's a residential home, and it's immediately adjacent to this to this property that they want to use as a commercial riding stable. 18 horses is going to change the character of this area. There will be problems with this. It's going to create a nuisance. There was no testimony as to the traffic study to support their arguments about no traffic, and there wasn't any report as to the stormwater management either. There's just non-expert testimony in that regard. So I'm asking you to please deny this request. It doesn't meet the standards. It's going to change the character of the area, and it will be a real problem for my client. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Block.
My comments have been addressed.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Steve Borowiak.
Steve Borowiak, I just want to let you know, yes, a lot has changed in 20 years. Butterfield isn't 2 lanes anymore, and the prairie path wasn't there, and the high school wasn't supporting as many children as it had. One thing I'd like to comment on is that what separated our relationship with my partner was the construction of that second building. So that second building was constructed for his construction company. I never have set foot in that building in the last 25 years. It was locked once it was constructed, and then litigation began, and that ended finally in August of 2003. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, that concludes the public comment portion of our meeting, and I thank you all for your comments and for keeping it within the time frame. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, November 1st. There's a motion and a second. Any additions, corrections, or deletions? Hearing none, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Moving on to regulatory services, I'll entertain a motion to approve DC-CO-23-22, a change order to county contract 4673-0001, served to Acela Inc. for a contract increase in the amount of $5,726.36.
You miss A?
Sorry,
You miss A?
it is a,
That was A.
no, that's 6A.
Make a motion, yes, I'll move.
I think you might have the old
I'm not
old one. I did too until I came in this morning. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Moving on to 6B, I'll entertain a motion to approve ECO 70-22 ordinance zoning 2241, Steeple Run Elementary. The zoning board of appeals recommendation to deny the conditional use for a school addition and a variation to reduce the rear setback from the required 50 feet to approximately 5 feet. Even though there was a denial at the zoning board of appeals, we'll take our motions in the affirmative. Is there a motion to approve this? Or a second?
Second.
Are any questions, comments, concerns? Yes. Member Coker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was looking at the packet regarding this item number, and I see that there were 5 A's and 1 nay, and there's a dissenting opinion and the finding of facts in favor of the property, but I don't have any finding of facts that states why this was denied. And I have a reason, but I don't see reasons of denial. The dissent.
Sure. The ZBA did not object to the conditional use. They did have an issue with the variation. It was for technical purposes only. They felt that the petitioner did not adequately approve or prove up the hardship, practical difficulty, or unique circumstance issue. And we heard from the petitioner today that they could have probably done a better job explaining those issues, but the issue was that they didn't prove up the technical hardship as to why they couldn't perhaps go vertically with a parking lot. That was the issue why the ZBA denied the variation.
Because of the vertical nature.
Well, just that there were potentially other options available, such as going vertically as opposed to horizontally. You heard today that testimony was in the record, but it wasn't made clear at the zoning board of appeals. And namely, the testimony is that to go vertically would have been very difficult and cost prohibitive because of the existing structure of the school. It would have made it very difficult. That didn't come out completely in the public hearing record. It was there, but it wasn't enough for the zoning board of appeals.
I have a question.
Yes. Rose.
Paul, is that related to putting a second story on the school or something to do with parking? So they were looking for a parking structure?
Well, they were suggesting, are there other alternatives than seeking a variation to go closer to the property line? And perhaps there were. One of them would have been vertical, but it wasn't explained thoroughly enough, while going vertically would have been a problem structurally to connect to the school. And I think we heard that today, brought out a little bit more. Once again, it was part of the public hearing record, but it wasn't completely clear to the zoning board of appeals members. I think it is clear in the record that going vertical or going with some other option would have been cost prohibitive, but also would have been difficult to tie it to the existing structure with a new parking lot structure.
Okay, but that was not clarified to the ZBA.
Correct.
Okay.
But once again, it is in the record, and I think we got a little bit better clarification of that today.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I agree with the one dissenting opinion. I mean, I think it was in the record there. I mean, I can't really listen to what was said today regarding the decision, but I think it's clear enough in the record that there was a hardship regarding that. And I understand what you're saying, the 5 other members didn't think there was enough in there
Yeah.
for them to think about it, but there was clearly enough for me. All right, thanks.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Parking structures are quite costly,
Wildly expensive.
wildly expensive. So for a school to have to put up a parking structure is just, to me, would be just unfathomable. So, you know, that's just, to me, is a no brainer on that one. So I'll be voting yes on this.
Anyone else have any questions, comments? Okay, notwithstanding the zoning board of appeals recommendation to deny, we have a motion to approve this. Roll call, please.
Member Rutledge,
Aye.
member Ozog,
Aye.
member Garcia,
Aye.
member Covert,
Aye.
member Krajewski,
Aye.
Chair Tornatori.
Aye, and the motion carries. And I apologize. I'm now working off of my 3rd development committee agenda that has been changed. I am no longer going to print up the final agenda when I get it on Friday, because apparently it's not final. This is not your fault. Somebody over there in the white sweater. Okay, well, that's all right. We'll give you a bit. There was an A, and I'm going to ask to go back to A. If we could, I apologize. I try to get ahead of it, but you know, fall always throws these wrinkles at me. 6A in the agenda is the action item requesting our committee to authorize the development chairman to place on file with the county board the DuPage County Building and Zoning Community Rating Service Flood Insurance Promotion Assessment. I'll entertain a motion to
Second.
take that action as a motion. A second. Paul, if you would briefly explain why this is going to be placed on file at the next county board meeting.
So the county is part of a community rating system from FEMA, and what that allows us to do is get a certain point system. That point system is at 6 right now, and that allows people who pay for flood insurance in the unincorporated area to receive a 20% reduction on their flood insurance premiums. We're in our 5-year recycle where we're being reviewed again by FEMA. And as part of that review, we found additional categories that we'd like to participate in that could potentially lower that rating, which would realize additional savings of anywhere between 5 and 10%, in addition to the 20% for unincorporated property owners who have to pay flood insurance. One of those requirements is doing a flood insurance assessment for the unincorporated area, which we have done. And FEMA requires that we place on file with our county board this document for review for the public. We generally don't place things on file, but FEMA requires that this be done, so it is available to the general public, and the county board members are aware of it as well. So we're asking, and once again, this is not looking for you to approve anything. This is just the county's assessment, building and zoning department working with stormwater's assessment of the current flood insurance program in the unincorporated area and where we stand, and some of the things that we might be able to do with outreach to get word out to people who have to pay flood insurance or who are in the flood way to be able to get flood insurance. So we're asking this committee to allow the county board or county development committee chairman to place on file next week with the county board this assessment.
Any questions, comments, objections?
Only comment I want to say is that I know how much work this is for staff, and so I used to do this. So I have to give you a lot of kudos on trying to go up or down a number, I should say, in this to get our property owners that percentage off of their flood insurance. So I want to thank you.
Appreciate it. It's been a joint effort between several agencies here at the county, between building and zoning as the prime agency because we're the unincorporated representatives, but working with stormwater, OEM, and public works. We've gathered a lot of data to be able to keep our score at 6 likely, but likely go down to 5 and possibly 4. So it's been a joint effort for many departments.
Okay, there's a motion. Did I see anybody's hand? There's a motion and a second to authorize me to place this on file for the next county board meeting. Any objection, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And motion carries. Now moving on to item D. I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 71-22 ordinance zoning 2247. Eric Lake, a question. The zoning board of appeals did not recommend zoning relief as the petitioner received a tie or a favorable vote by a lesser number than the required majority for a conditional use or principal recreational use for stables in a riding academy and a conditional use to allow an existing pole barn to remain less than 20 feet from the west interior setback where it has existed for at least 5 years. As we take all motions in the affirmative, is there a motion to approve this ordinance? Is there a second? Do we have any questions or comments from the board? We start with Member Rutledge.
Thank you, Chair Torrie. Full disclosure, I lived directly across the street from this property from 1992 to 2018. I am a Denata volunteer, so horses are definitely a part of my life. I have been for 12 years over there. I recall when they built the barn over there and opened it up for boarding, and was disappointed 5 years later when that partnership fell apart and the horses were moved out. Since that time, I have only ever seen a handful of horses. So I'll take issue with the comment that it was full, because I believe there was only 5 horses in the last several years there. I also have some questions about the presentation by the owners to allow this. Again, horse has been my world for a long time. I had no idea that we had a national equestrian trail anywhere connected there. Never seen that before. Also the talking about there is no state or federal regulation for 10,000 square foot per horse. I can't imagine that the state or the Fed would get involved in making that kind of a determination, but the county absolutely does. The comment earlier too about the fact that horse owners come for 2 hours, 3 days a week, to me leaves those horses in a stall for an excessively long amount of time. So I don't know who would be responsible for the regular turnout that they talked about. And then to me, kind of the final was the fact that Mr. Borowiak is a veterinarian, and there was a lot of comments about video surveillance cameras that were set up that since there was nobody on site, but that they'd never had a fire or any other issue on that property in the 20-some years. But we did have a barn fire in the last couple of years, not very far away. And I think that the burden would have been on Dr. Borowiak to get 18 panicked horses out of a fire building. I can't imagine as a veterinarian, he would go, not my problem. So I think that does put a burden on him. Again, I'm perfectly fine with horses on that property, but 18 horses on that property is far too many. So I'll be voting no on this.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Thank you so much. My concern on this is more of a zoning issue, because there is not a primary structure on here. There is no one here full-time, kind of the same thing that Member Rutledge was saying. If there was an emergency, there's no one there to help the horses. I'm also concerned, we had a discussion last meeting that we just had with one horse on a very little bit of an acreage. But that seemed to have a neighborhood that was a little bit different. This does not have that, in my opinion. And 19 horses in stables where they don't have a turnout area seems very inhumane to me. So I just think there are things on here that are not to the betterment of the community, and they are not following the zoning regulations in terms of trying to follow the code the way it was written. So I'll be voting no on this.
Member Colbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was listening to Member Rutledge, and I want to give the opportunity for I want to hear more about this actually, and I want to give an opportunity for clarification for Member Rutledge's questions. I am curious. I don't think we're allowed to respond to public comment or to speak to the presenters. So I don't know if Paul wants to.
You want to address a question, Paul?
Address some questions to clarify what Member Rutledge asked. And, my understanding is this was zoned as an R2 with conditional use before since 1998. But there was a break in 2003 where they reduced the 18 horses to 5 horses. And, and this is gonna cause some traffic on Butterfield Road. I want to know, is there gonna be another option for entryway there? What are they lacking and how can they make up for that? And is it possible?
The property zoned R2 single family residential, under the state law, and under the county zoning ordinance, there's a provision that if you have a piece of property, irrespective of what it's zoned, and that property is 5 acres or greater in size, and it is primarily being used for agricultural purposes, that is typically growing crops, corn, soybeans, or raising livestock, cows and pigs, including raising horses, then you qualify for what's called an agricultural exemption, which means the county has no jurisdiction over that property. We issue a certification to the property owner acknowledging that the property is over 5 acres and the property owners engaged in agricultural pursuit. When the two property owners came to the county back in the late 90s, they wanted to have a horse property. We indicated that they would have to go through a similar process just like that, like this today, a conditional use to be able to have horses on a property that's less than 5 acres in size. The property owners were aware that if they were to combine their properties together, they would have over 5 acres of land. And the property to the east, the subject property, which was vacant at the time, could support a horse barn, turnout area, and riding arena. And the property to the west, which had the single family home on it, could continue to operate as a single family home. The property owners decided to combine their properties into one zoning lot. They kept the underlying parcels in place, but they combined the properties into one zoning lot, gave them 5 acres, which then allowed them to proceed in building a horse barn without any county approval. They didn't need a building permit, they didn't need stormwater, and they didn't need zoning relief. They were entitled to have an agricultural use. The barn they built is the barn that is out there today. The riding stable they built is the riding stable they built out today that they have today. The turnout areas, the same turnout areas that they built back in the 90s that they have today. They built the stalls at, I believe, 12 by 12 foot stalls. They built, and they built it in conjunction with one another. There was no agricultural use on the western portion of the property, which is where the single family home is. All of the agricultural use was on the 2.93 acres that we see today. But because they had a total zoning lot of 5 acres, they enjoyed the exemption. Sometime in the early 2000s, the property ownership was broken up, which meant the two properties went back to their original zoning lots. The single family home went back to its own fee simple single family home, separate from the property that now had the barn, the turnout, and the riding stable on it. The county was not made aware of that until sometime in the mid 2000s. So that the property, in theory, had lost its agricultural exemption when the two property owners split joint partnership of the properties and the use. But the county was not aware of that until sometime in the early 2000s, at which time the county issued a violation notice to the property owner that had the barn on the property, indicating that they no longer enjoyed the agricultural exemption because they fell below the 5 acres. Since that time period, it's been a long time, but there have been several requests by the property owner to seek zoning relief. We've seen a few of these in the last couple of years. But in order to get out from underneath the violation, the property owner has been petitioning the county for different types of zoning relief. This is the latest iteration of that zoning relief. So the key point here is that at no point has the petitioner enjoyed any special zoning relief from the county. It's just that when this property was built, it enjoyed the agricultural exemption. The use hasn't changed. The number of stalls hasn't changed. The number of horses, in theory, haven't changed. It's just that the technical ability to have this as an agricultural exemption is lost. And now the only way they can have this is by this conditional use process.
Is it possible to have this use again by combining those two properties together again or no?
If the properties were combined again and they had 5 acres of land, which I believe they do because all the properties surrounding these two properties are forest preserve properties now. There's about 525 acres immediately adjacent to the St. James Farm that's forest preserve. But if they combine the two properties, they would have over 5 acres and they could go back to that agricultural exemption again.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Paul? Just
Say it one, Paul. City, it says in here, the city of Warrenville objected and it says see attached, but I couldn't find, I mean, there's a lot of attachments in there. I saw the Forest Preserve letter, but I didn't see the city of Warrenville. What was their
The
objection?
concern of Warrenville was a technical one in terms of this issue of on a residential zoning lot where the principal use of the property is the single family home, the county allows for one horse for each an acre of land that you have, and an additional horse for 20,000 square feet of land. That was their main concern, that this was inconsistent with the county zoning ordinance relative to a single family home and having accessory uses of horses. This use is not relative to that specific zoning code. This is a separate recreational use that's allowed as a conditional use exclusively for horses, or recreational use as the principal use of the property. So once again, Warrenville was objecting to the notion of single family home, you're entitled only a certain number of horses.
Thank you. Other questions, Member Rutledge?
Thank you, Chair. Paul, what was the Forest Preserve response to this? Because I didn't see that in the packet either, and I saw that there was a notation at some point that they
That's
had
in there.
concerns in some place.
Yeah, originally the Forest Preserve didn't have any concerns about this. Historically, the Forest Preserve had some concerns because the Forest Preserve was interested in purchasing both of the properties to kind of close off the southern portion of the St. James Farm. But there are no concerns now. I spoke with the Forest Preserve specifically about a concern about people from this facility using what's called the St. James South agricultural area of the Forest Preserve. And not only did the Forest Preserve not object to that, but for instance, Galusha Farms to the south, there was a fence between Galusha Farms and the Forest Preserve. They've taken that fence down, and Galusha Farms horses are allowed to come into the agricultural section and ride. And Forest Preserve indicated that the only prohibition from this property using the Forest Preserve, there's a fence there that is on this property. It's this property's fence. If they were to take that fence down, this property would be able to have their horses ride into the agricultural section of the Forest Preserve in the southern half. That was really the only issue we had.
Okay, right.
I think didn't they also have an issue with class 3 ecosystem, and they felt that they're trying to restore that in their Forest Reserve, and that the equestrian. I mean,
That was concerned, but that has been resolved because we spoke to the Forest Preserve specifically about that, and they're trying to turn that southern portion into an agricultural forest preserve, not necessarily an active forest preserve. But they're not limestone riding trails, but the Forest Preserve does cut a swath of green space throughout the entire agricultural area.
I'm not sure what the class 3 ecosystem is for them, but they said that the equestrian stuff potentially, I mean, their objections.
Yeah, they have riding and trails within that area. It's once again, it's an agricultural section that they're trying to promote there, but there are riding trails. They're not limestone trails. They're grass pathways that horses can ride in. And speaking of the Forest Preserve, they've actually taken down some of the fencing on the perimeter of that area so that people can ride horses, people can run, people can walk in those grass path areas around the agricultural areas of that Forest Preserve.
This is just my one last comment. I love horses, and I want to see these type of facilities thrive and succeed because it's more economically friendly, riding a horse than cars. And we talk about the environment all the time. And to encourage children and adults, to ride horses is a great thing, and I value that. Unfortunately, just looking at the facts that were presented today, it just seems like it just would not work with the zoning requirement and the violation 2003. I think there is an option for the owners to rectify the situation, but as it stands right now, my hands are tied and I'm going to have to vote no on this, but I think this could be fixed in the future. And I would like to see it succeed and thrive, but with what we have right now in front of us, I can't vote a yes based on the facts and our zoning requirements right now, unfortunately.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we all have to remember, we're really not supposed to be advocates one side or another. We're supposed to be an independent body here. So while I appreciate everybody telling me how they're going to vote, I think it's important not to necessarily advocate. That being said, as I look at this, I think bottom line is this is, one of the reasons I stopped doing divorce work a long time ago is because people have a tough time when they split up. And this looked to me to be at some point a partnership between two property owners. And when it was a combined partnership, they were able to do exactly what they're doing or what they want to do now. And when the partnership broke up, one of the partners said, I don't want the other partner doing what you've been doing. That's how I see this. And I don't know that there's any facts that would necessarily change that. I also think, I heard about violations and yeah, violations were there, but the violations were there because, again, of the breakup of the partnership and an attempt to resolve this. I don't know much about horses. I don't know what Member Rutledge does. I know I like them. I've ridden them occasionally, but the reality here is that it seems to me that if at one point what's being proposed by the petitioner was legal, and because the partnership no longer exists, it now suddenly is not approved. I'm not so sure that that is equitable. That's fairness. And I think if there's an opportunity within our zoning laws to give a conditional use, that's what the zoning laws allow. That's why they're there. From a humane standpoint, I've heard about 18 horses in the stable. There's 18 horses on this stable from day one when those properties were combined. The fact that the properties no longer are owned by the same entity, whatever that was, doesn't change the fact that there's still 18 stables and 18 horses there. They're no more likely to be in jeopardy today than they were when this property was owned by both. It appears that there's plenty of room to ride these horses. As I understand, whether it's a national equestrian trail or just a place to ride horses, to me, it doesn't matter. It's a place to ride your horses. So, I look at it and I just wonder, and to Member Covert's opinion, yeah, it'd be wonderful if these people could get back together and make it agricultural. I don't know if that's going to happen. So what we have is what we have. Obviously, the Zoning Board of Appeals was, I won't say undecided, it was 3-3. But again, I have a problem punishing someone because of the acts of another. And I think that's what happened here when the petitioner is not allowed to proceed to do what they had been doing because there's this, for lack of a better word, breakup between the parties. So I would be voting yes, as everybody's telling us how they're going to vote. I don't really like to do that, but I'd be voting yes because of that very reason. Member Krajewski, you had your hand up.
No, I got my question answered. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Yes, Member Ozak.
I find myself definitely agreeing with you in terms of hardship and practical difficulty, because I think that the dissolution of partnership did create such a situation. And these are existing structures, existing use. So I'll be voting yes, and I agree with you in this case. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments they wish to raise? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance. Again, this is a recommendation to the Polk County Board next week. Would you call the roll, please?
Member Covert? Member Covert? No. Member Garcia?
No.
Member Ozog?
Yes.
Member Rutledge? No. Member Krajewski?
Pass.
Chair Tornatori?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's 3-3. Okay, so this will be sent, even though it's 3-3, it does get sent to the county board, Paul?
Yes.
Okay, it'll be on the county board's agenda. There will be no need for a supermajority or anything of that nature. It will just go to the county board next Tuesday for passage. And I thank you all for attending. Do we have any old business? Do we have any new business? Hearing none, seeing none, without objection, we're adjourned. Thank you all.